it honestly made me,
Financial position.
Oh,
There's a
gosh.
huge surplus.
and they're bragging about it. I mean, it's a big thing that how much more they're gonna get after they pass this next bill that they've been reading on, that they're gonna cut more from the businesses, and, I mean, I don't know, it just was mind-boggling to me. We're certainly not hurting. I sat there and heard it.
I'd like to back up to the comment, Brian, you made about more folks are being factored into the standard plan than the regs would allow. Set that, the right and wrongness of that aside, is there any talk about how that's going to impact the funding need in the standard plan? Because if those folks are moving, it's underfunded without
Correct.
adjustments.
I want to take a sidebar into that for a second.
I'm asking that because I'd like that.
Yeah, okay, so we have a lot of detail on this. We've had very explicit communication with the state on this, listing out the objections, and I shouldn't even call them objections, the observations that we have made around what the law says. House Bill 403 is the standard, what the waiver says, and what the state is actually doing, and the inconsistencies there. And even gone so far as to provide specific examples of individuals. Okay, like John Smith, Mary Jones. Here's their diagnosis. Here's their service history.
They ought to be tailored, but
Right, but because of the way you have interpreted this, which we've already explained is inaccurate, here's the result of it. John Smith goes in the standard plan. John Smith no more belongs in the standard plan than, you know, the man on the moon. I mean, some of these are so just blatantly obvious. I mean, you don't have to be a clinician to get this, okay?
and the
We
per-
submitted 10.
and the per head funding is not adequate.
Radio, buddy. So the standard plans are going to get these high-cost individuals that'll look good on the top line because they get the revenue for them. The expense, the bottom line, they'll never be able to cover. It'll be a mess. In that regard, the John Smith mess is the worst part of this. This is how I've explained it to people. This is like the old world of managed care, where everybody hated it because all you thought about it was that it was about not giving people what they should have. That's really what it boils down to. And the state has an incentive to do that to save money.
Here's a question though, because some of those, if John Smith's acuity really gets that high and he initially is or put into the standard plan, at some point, John Smith very well may migrate back
Sure.
under their rules
Right,
to the Taylor plan.
right.
Now, does the
But
per
fast
member fee,
enough. I'm
does the
sorry.
per member
Howard,
fee
just-
for the following month come back with him?
Oh, you know, you don't even want to get started on this
So the
now.
answer to that one is no.
Well, it's going to have to,
Eventually.
there's going to have to be some way that they, as they give us more members, it would factor into our member months. Now remember, the way our revenue works is the member months, and you understand that concept, right? Is the multiplier of the rate,
Yes.
right? So we end up with more members and more revenue
Yes.
when John Smith and Mary Jane and all of these folks come flying over. But isn't it a shame they've had to go through hell to to get there.
Brian, at the point that John Smith is in the standard plan and his continued need for services gets sent in to Blue Cross and Blue Shield or whoever, whatever, at what point are they going to start denying services because they've used more
Yeah.
than
right.
that individual had, and they're not gonna dip into their deep pockets to pay for something they aren't getting paid for? So where's that gonna stop?
Yeah, well, it's gonna stop at the point where there's a triggering event that allows the person to move out of just what Mike was talking about, out of the standard plan and into the tailored plan. Either the type of service the individual wants, and again, this is the managed care horror story, right? From like back in the 1980s or whatever. The type of service that the individual should be having is entitled to as a Medicaid recipient. Because Medicaid's an eligibility, it is a entitlement. And if you have medical necessity for a service, you are entitled to receive it in the Medicaid program, okay? So either the service will not be available, all of the same services are not available in the standard plan as they are in the tailored plan. Nor is the intensity of service available in the standard plan like it is in the tailored plan. So that's what will happen. They will be motivated to move the person out. Now, at what point that happens exactly, we'll find out. There are some specific triggering events though around hospitalizations and emergency department, and then the person has to have an assessment. It's, yeah.
So I guess right now, and looking forward and knowing that those variables are going to change at some point, how do you, if I'm thinking this correctly, how do you prepare so that your capacity, so you have the capacity, if at some point, you don't know when that may change, but you may have people flowing back and forth or...
I'm open for suggestions.
And that was,
Really.
I guess that was my...
You're right, I mean, so
Right.
what's the answer?
Yeah.
You know, that we be really smart, conservative. Number one, fight like hell on the front end of this for the people, okay? I'm not fighting for the money, I'm fighting for the people that are gonna get screwed in this, all right? And that's exactly what's gonna happen. So we go to the mat on that, and it wouldn't surprise me if the state got sued. I mean, that's the level that this is at, okay?
It's gotta happen.
Well, you know, somebody's gotta be willing to get their nose bloody. You know, Mike, it's the same thing, you know, you hear me in here rant and rave every couple of months about the latest bad thing that's, you know, getting ready to happen. You know, who wants to get their nose bloody?
What
You know?
do the people you're talking to in the department say when you point out that something's
They've
illegal?
completely clammed up now.
And this is a two-part question. Do they ever feel like they need to advocate something legal in the legislature? Are they in the legislature fighting the good fight, or are they just holed up in their little world
Great question.
and not participating where they ought to be? And if the legislature's forcing them to do something illegal, they ought to be over there in the legislature fighting the fight.
I'm always happy to give you my opinion, and I think it would probably fall into a closed session discussion.
Well, we might need to talk about legal matters.
That's what, that would be my recommendation, to fully explore responses to your question. Once again, I'm happy to do it, just it's up to you guys, how far you want to go with it.
Well, I can't put motions on the floor. So somebody else.
And maybe, you know what, look, maybe we should.
Can we
this.
do that
Maybe
in a
just-
finance meeting?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
We just,
So we can,
Okay.
so we can.
Yeah, we can go places.
Maybe the thing to do is to just get, I mean, and I don't, really honestly, I mean, I don't know how much there is to talk about. There's some more things we need to explain, that we have done, and I mean, there's some personnel things and like that, but it's what it is.
So,
Get through that, and then we
Let's
can
get
come
to
back
it.
to this other thing,
back,
right?
yeah, and back to the sidebar, that sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Okay, so the next document that you'll see after this document is a more detail around the revenue and where that, and the sources of those revenues. You can see it's broken down, and even within the headings, it's broken down to some major components of that. So Medicaid funds, total state funds, federal funds, county funds, some other service funds, and on, and it ultimately breaks down. You see it ties out at the bottom at $390 million, which is the same number you saw on the front, on the very first document, where we showed that the revenues and expenses were equal at $390 million. Now, of that $390 million, $5.5 million of it is coming from the fund balance. So, in order to balance this budget. So, if we, if we didn't bring that in, it would be, we'd be showing a $5.5 million loss. But this gives you the detail on the revenue. I don't know if there's any further questions on that. There's a similar document on the next page, which goes into more detail around the Medicaid revenue. So Medicaid is 3/4 of our total revenue, roughly. It gives you some additional information on the Medicaid revenue, showing you that there's some detail by aid, by category of aid is the top section. That's and the bottom section shows you by program component which how much revenue is coming in, and you can see that the two equal at $317 million. And the per member per month number out on the right side, the rate under the capitation revenue at $181.14 is the same number that we see in our rate letter from the state for the rates beginning in July. It's the same weighted number. So, I don't know if there are any questions on either of the revenue sections. If not, we have a couple of sections in here dealing with our classification plan and our salary grades, and the minimums, midpoints, and maximums for those salary grades. These were, although we use the exact salaries of the people that are incumbent in their position, if we had vacancies, we'd probably use something close to the midpoint to estimate the impact of that new position or vacant position based on our classification plan and the salary schedule. Patrick, is there anything additional you wanted to talk about as it relates to the classification plan and the salary schedule?
I mean, the only, my only comment is this is a continual work in progress. Since I came on as HR director about 13 months ago, this is an area that we continue to work on and improve and get our classification structure and salary ranges in a structure that makes sense. I would add that we're now substantially equivalent from the State Human Resources Commission, and so we have the ability to better manage the classification and pay structure to meet the needs and changing needs of Vaya Health, and that's what we'll continue to do.
I just wish they were a little larger print.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any questions regarding our classification system. This is something we have to file with the state annually?
Well, we're substantially equivalent,
Yeah.
and so when we do our annual reporting to State Human Resources, they ask, part of the checklist, has the board approved the salary plan for Vaya Health. And so that's why it's part of the budget package and the approval process for the next fiscal year.
And so, there are no questions regarding to the plans related to the salaries, either the classification plan or the salary schedule. The last document in your packet is the draft of the annual budget ordinance to vote on at the board meeting on June the 27th. And I told Ira earlier that I would explain a couple of items on the administrative expenses. As we work through this budget, we've seen that the services for both Medicaid and non-Medicaid, the service expense is budgeted at the same level as the service revenue. However, that's not true on the administration. We have budgeted the administrative revenue at roughly $40.2 million, and the expenses were at $52.2 million, which is a $12 million difference, and some of the reasons for that difference. The loss of administrative revenue related to the loss of Rutherford County, as well as the loss of membership to the standard plans during the year, is worth about $3.6 million of that $12 million. We are spending we have budgeted to spend about $2.3 million on developmental expenses related to the tailored plan, which are, we have to expend this before we ever see our first dollar in capitation for those plans. And we've also talked about the unfunded intergovernmental transfers of $2.3 million. We have put into the budget a retention and merit pool, including the tax impact of that of about $500,000. As I mentioned earlier, the single stream cut of $600,000 is in there and part of the difference. And then the deficit on the non-Medicaid administration is about $2.7 million. So the sum of those, six items is the $12 million difference between what we anticipate in administrative revenue and the administrative expenses.
Quick question. We are going to be up 4.25 in expenses over current fiscal year in admin. And you've mentioned one factor there which would cause us to go up, because developing expenses for a tailored plan is not something that you would have in this present budget year. So that's a
Right.
factor that's going to push that up, and we have a figure. And actually, you've mentioned two, because you've mentioned retention incentive of $500,000, and that's a factor we didn't have this year.
Right.
So what are some of the other factors that have driven up the admin side to the 4 million? Because I can identify pretty easily those two that are not going to be part of the current budget year.
Right. One thing that we didn't budget for last year that we should have was for depreciation. That's $600,000. It's in this year's budget. Depreciation. So we budgeted $600,000 depreciation. Let's see, we're up. So that's where we're at 3.1 of the 4 million. With that 600, with that additional 2.3 for the developmental work related to tailored plan.
So you got 2.3 million in the admin budget we didn't have last year,
Right, and we
over
got-
the developmental and tailored plan.
Right.
Tailored plan, and whether you want to think about this separately or together, to bid on a tailored plan, we have to be NCQA accredited. we're making progress towards that. So that's another major lift. It has dollars associated with it. So that's embedded probably in the Taylor Plan stuff because it's a requirement.
So as part of that accreditation, have you had to hire like outside firms to assist in, because,
That's a big deal.
yeah, because that seems like that would flow as a natural part of it, that you're gonna have a list of outside firms that you've had to bring on both those counts, just to try and assist with marketing for the people that you have, well, marketing is the wrong word, but getting information out to people about the Medicaid transformation is a responsibility you have under that.
Less about that. I mean, you know, these things, so we have one major RFP out right now, another one ready to go. You know, there's the requirement that we have to contract with a standard plan vendor for something. These are, you know, these are going to be very complex contracts. I mean, doing the RFP, I mean, we hired a consultant who joined with Trillium on this, which, you know, saved us both a bunch of money. You know, but we hired a consultant to, you know, develop the RFP. So even before we even done anything, you know, we're spending money. I mean, you have to.
They are incredibly complex contracts when they're coming back from, because I've
Yeah.
seen the PHP ones that we're trying to do with our health department.
Yeah, right.
And trying to ferret through, you know, the contract and the manuals that are incorporated by reference is just,
Yeah, so this is, you know, it's analogous to, like, why do we get outside counsel sometimes? You know, Tracy's brilliant. You know, we have a lot of good people, but this is like in another league of doing things. And you have to set the stage with the RFP because you're building towards what the contractual agreement's gonna be. So, you know, these are big, you know, we hired a national expert in Colorado. You know, this is not, you know, run-of-the-mill consultant, somebody who can write a RFP for it. No, this is the pharmacy benefit management. You know, we have a combination consultant there that is a law firm from Washington. I mean, these are probably the most complicated contracts that we'll face, will be around pharmacy benefit management. I mean, you know, we'll be contracting with, you know, fill in the blank.
so it's, those contracts, even if something is, and yours is far more complex than what the counties with health departments are looking at, far, and they are still phenomenally complex at that level.
Yeah, it's
I've
beyond,
spent a few days reviewing them.
yeah, I mean, it's out of, it's extraordinary. You know, it's not the
Yeah.
ordinary kind of realm. So, you know, we need, you know, attorneys with expertise in that kind of contracting. You know, we had another company that's a pharmacy benefit management consultant to help us, you know, create the RFP for that. I mean, you know, just everything has got dollars wrapped around it.
So the whole development, and that's all part of your development expenses, the accreditation consultants, the consultants for making sure your security is up to speed for their, and all that kind of stuff is wrapped into this. Okay.
Ira, where I thought you were going, and either you're pausing or you're just not going as far as I thought you were going. 40 million, 52 million, there's 12 million there that we don't have money for. I mean, just looking at those two numbers, we gotta get that money somewhere else. We've accounted for 3 million of it, roughly, that's new.
Right.
So we're left with 8 or 9 million that we can't cut. We feel like we can't cut. So sort of describe that 8 or 9 million for us
Well,
in
those-
general terms.
Yeah, so those are those are some of the things that, as I alluded to in kind of my opening statement on the budget, about the things we are asking the state for more money in our administrative revenue. We've asked them to, we've explained to them how our costs are largely fixed as it relates to membership, and the loss of Rutherford County administrative revenue doesn't translate to an equal amount of lost expense related to Rutherford County. There's also the 4 or 5 items that we won't see revenue coming in for these items until we get to the tailored plan status, but yet we have to incur these expenses now, as we just discussed, the tailored plan development. There's also, we also asked them to take a look at peer support services, as well as these life of the waiver limits. We think that they underestimated on our revenue, our capitation revenue, when they developed our rates. Now, there's also all this work around transitions of care that we know is going to be very intensive in terms of work and resources, and there is nothing in the rates for that as yet. And so we've told them what we need in terms of $1 million and millions of dollars of administrative revenue. We have not gotten a response to that yet. So we're kind of sitting and waiting to hear how our arguments set with the state. We were unsuccessful largely with those arguments last year.
Let me ask the follow-up question.
Yep.
Because there's only one other place to really get this. How many, our cash on hand, how many days are we going to go down at some point in this? Because that's really the only, it's those 2 places, I think. And you were looking, when we did the spread in January, we had cash on hand, and it was closing down lower than most counties would want to carry. And how many days, this should impact about, what, 6 days cash on hand?
Well,
Figure a little over $1 million a day.
yeah, it's one, we burn right now today, we burn in service and administrative expenses $1.1 million per calendar day. So for a given month, we're going to burn about $34 million.
And we're going to be making a whole, a little over 6, I think, if I looked at this, or there's a $12 million difference, but you've explained some of how to get some of that back.
Right.
So what are we looking at as?
Some of it, there's the.
We hope to get back.
There's the, let's call it the rebate, which is good for how much?
Last year was good for $3.1 million.
So there's $3.1 million to reduce that. That we have there's a huge surplus.
Let's try asking it this way.
You want to know where the revenue is going to come from. We don't need to say anything more about the expense. It's where's the revenue?
Right. Right. So, that $3.1 million, we have not budgeted in anywhere. So that's a potential, and we expect to get that. I mean, we've gotten it the last 4 or 5 years. So we could justify bringing that in as additional revenue.
So that subtracts off of that 6. So now we're down to 3.
I mean, the last time we were in Raleigh, Brian and I together, to argue our points at our individual kind of financial position meeting with the state, even the CFO at DHHS, Roger Barnes, was questioning his own staff about why are we building in a $2.3 million deficit on the intergovernmental transfers? Why do we build a deficit in every year? So that, our argument at least found some support with Roger Barnes. Whether we ever see that money or not, time will tell. But these are the arguments that we're trying to make. We're trying to help them understand what it costs to run one of these operations. And if they don't, they see our financial condition. We're not the only one. Cardinal is in a worse cash days than we are. Alliance is
in worse, but.
yeah.
Yeah, if it makes anybody feel better, this isn't unique at all. I mean, you go look at the summary, I don't know, I guess you don't have it done yet, I don't know how many for.
Right.
If you look at simply the profit and loss statement, if you will, of the LME MCOs, you got, I think, just Trillium maybe that's made money this year. Maybe another one is gonna end up, all the rest have lost money. All of them. I mean, they've messed this up, okay? For everybody to be losing money, and that's the question to Roger, it's like, what are your actuaries doing here that you're modeling this to result in these losses all across the board? Something's wrong. I mean, you made a mistake. So, the last, the last chapter hasn't been written. The wild cards are how the single stream reductions are going to occur. There's a swing there of, could be as much as $4 or $5 million. There's the $3 million coming back to us in the rebate. And then there's the what are they going to do for us on our rate. I'm meeting with the secretary Thursday. So, I'm putting my best people on it. So it's just, you're asking the right question.
But I do want to go back to the expense side.
Okay.
And it would appear to me that sort of our position statement on that is we've done what we could do. You've mentioned layoffs, you've mentioned some other things. We've done what we can do, but to do anything further would jeopardize delivering the services, supporting the providers out there, and putting us in a very poor position for our work 2 years from now.
That's the balancing act, right? Is we have, without a doubt, we just, we talked about all of these new things we have to do that cost a lot of money. So going into this, you're gonna have to, you can't cut your way out of it, right, is what you're saying.
It almost sounds mindless, but it's one of those, we can't afford to, but we can't afford not to.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mhm. Now, we have made some reductions in other areas. I don't know where you're gonna, what point we're gonna get to that on the personnel side. Okay? And, yeah, we should talk about that in closed session.
Okay.
But again, so there's two things in closed session.
So you have finished the general open session presentation at this point, correct?
Yes.
Do we need to take any action as far as recommendation?
Mr. Chairman, I would respectfully ask that we not recommend it at this point until we have a little more time to hear closed session and review it for a while, because I'm really just diving into this for the first time today.
And this, and again, you have to defer to your counsel there, but this is the, public presentation of the budget, and there's X amount of time for comment and adoption and all of that. So we're just, this is we're not even at the first chapter yet. This is just the forward, right? So in terms of,
we don't take any action today.
correct, Jay?
We're just hearing.
You're just hearing it today.
Yeah.
And asking our questions, and
Right.
I guess instructing if there are further points of clarification.
Yeah. And we have, it's 30 days?
Yeah, it looks like it's built into it, and you can make changes at the last
Oh, yeah.
minute. to budget, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just making it publicly available today.
So is there a motion to go into closed session?
Yes.
Jay, okay, but based on what's the general statute, Jay?
Legal and personnel.
143, 115, 38A6.
What is that?
That is discuss legal matters, and 5, discuss personnel.
Okay. All right, is that your motion?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second? Any discussion about the motion to go into closed session? All in favor, say aye. Aye.